Hey, this is Evan with Octane and Electrons. We're going to go over installing the Ultima single fire programmable ignition kit. This is for the Harley Evo motors. Today we're going to be putting it on my 98 Dyna lowrider. We'll go over the parts of the kit and then show you how to get started getting on the bike. Alright, here's what we got with the kit here. We have the ignition module. This replaces the pickup that's usually under the nose cone on the Harley motor. And there's no separate ignition box like with your stock ignition system. It's all combined here. We got a parts bag with your connectors. We have our single fire coil. So this has a 3-terminal coil and it fires each cylinder individually using the same coil. So it's kind of 2 coils in one almost. We have a replacement for the timing rotor. Although it's the same as the original as far as I know, so I don't think you necessarily need to replace that if there's nothing wrong with your original. And new plug wires and hardware. So that's everything we got here, and I'll show you how to get started getting things off the bike. Okay, to get started, you're going to want to remove the timing plate or timing cover here. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that off in a second. I'm going to remove the seat so I have some more access to the connectors up here. Here is the, you can see it back here, right here is the plug from our pickup sensor. So on this motor it runs from this plate here underneath the motor and kind of comes up along the other side, and it's plugged in and the connector's kind of snapped onto a little terminal there. I know I've got a Electric Glide, a 96 Electric Glide, and I know on that one the plug is actually down here. It kind of connects to the side here, so there's no need to route it under the motor. So it kind of depends. The installation's about the same for any Evo motor, but there might be some different wire routing and stuff depending on what model and year. Okay, and then on the other side, I'm going to need to remove the coil cover here so I can get the plate off and have access to the wiring. So I'm going to get all that stuff removed, and then I'll show you the next step. Alright, so you can see here I've removed the cover, which here's the inner and outer covers removed. I've already loosened the hardware here that holds the timing plate in place. Remove those. Now you'll see the plate's loose in here. So you'll see where the wires are fished through the hole here. So basically we're going to have to depin the connector on the other end and fish it all the way back up through. Although if you are just not going to reuse this, I'm going to use this on another bike, so I'm not going to cut it. But if you're just going to toss this, if your pickup went bad or something, you can just cut the wires and pull it through. So there's that. Now you can see I've loosened the electrical box on the other side. So there's one, I believe it's a 1/2-inch nut on a stud right here that needs to be removed. And the other one you can access from the top here. There's a stud with another 1/2-inch nut right there. Okay, and then let me go around to the other side. So you'll see I've got the outer part of the box removed, which is 7/16 nuts on these studs. Alright, and then there is one small 3/8 bolt that goes through down here and picks up a bracket on the inside. So with those removed, you have your whole electrical plate loose. You can now easily go ahead and remove your original coil from the bracket, which I'll do. These 2 mounting bolts here. And then I'm going to get to the ignition pickup plug over here, unplug that, and I'm going to remove the stock ignition box right here from the back of the plate. So I'm going to get all those done, then we'll get started installing the new stuff. Alright, now you want to remove the wires from your coil. So I've already removed the 3/8 nuts holding them in place, and then just pull them off of the studs here. Now we're going to reuse what should be the white wire here as the switched hot connection. I'm going to test it. So basically I'm going to hook up my multimeter to ground, and then the hot side of my meter on the 12 volt setting, or 20 volt setting, sorry, to the white wire, and make sure that when my key and my kill switch are in the run position that I get 12 volts there. So I'm going to test that and make sure. Should be the white wire that was connected to one of the coil terminals here. Alright, so you can see here I've got my meter set on the 20 volt setting, DC, and I have my red lead clipped onto the wire. So I was wrong on this bike. It's actually, can't see because it's tucked in there, it's actually white with a black stripe. And then I have the other side of my meter grounded to the frame here. So I have my key on right now. You can see the lights are on. So this should be a switched hot wire. This should go to 12 volts when I turn my kill switch to the run position. It's off right now. So I'm going to hit it. That goes to battery voltage when I'm in the run position, and off when I'm in the off position. And even if I leave my kill switch in the run position, that should die with the key switch, and it does. Okay, so that's the right wire to power the new coil. I removed the mounting hardware from my original ignition box. So they're 8mm bolts, and there's some a standoff washer behind them. So I've removed them here. Here's the ignition module mounted to the back of the electrical box here, and then unplugged it there. And now I can get the original module out of the way. It's no longer needed. So I've unplugged my ignition pickup connector here. And so it's mounted right behind here on the bracket. Hard to see, but there's a little post back there. This hole in the in the connector right here just slots over it, and that's what keeps it in place. So I just kind of pulled it back so I could pop it off of the mount, and then so I went ahead and unplugged it, and I just fished the wiring harness over here so you could see it. So now that that's all unplugged, I'm not going to need this section of the old ignition harness, so it can just be kind of tucked back in there. So now I got to fish this wiring harness all the way back over to the ignition pickup side. So it's kind of tough. You just got to wiggle it around, pull on the wire a little bit, and you got to feed it back under the motor and free it up over on the ignition side. So I'm going to do that and then get the ignition module removed. Okay, just a couple tips. I depinned the connector here so the terminals are loose. Mine was routed back behind the breather here underneath it. So with it depinned, I could pull it down and slide it out underneath like that. And then there is, kind of hard to see, but there's a small wire clip down there. So I bent that out a little bit with the screwdriver. That frees up the wiring here, and I can kind of feed it down so it's loose under the bike. Now, if I go to the other side, I freed up a little bit of slack here where it exits, and should be able to grab the wire here and kind of bend it around and gently feed it back from under the bike so I have it all loose. So I'm going to do that, and there we go. There's my whole pickup wiring harness. So now it's a matter of kind of bending it around, getting the module loose until you can pull the whole thing back out. So I'm going to do that, and then we can get the new one installed. So there's nothing wrong with the old timing rotor, but I'm going to install the new one anyways just to show you. The old rotor is removed with a single bolt inside that is an 8mm. So I've already loosened it. I'm going to pull that out. And then you can just kind of wiggle the rotor a little bit and it'll come off. So the new one and on the old one, they go in place with that little notch right there. You can see lines up with the notch on the inside, so you can't really put it in wrong. So I'm going to install my new one. Just line up the notch, press it in, and then tighten up the old bolt. Alright, I'm going to install the new ignition module. So the wires route through the hole inside the nose cone there, just like the old ones came out. So I'm going to feed those all through and pull the whole wiring harness through, and then get the module in place inside and install it with the new hardware. So I'm going to put it in about the same location as the old one I took out was, so that'll time it pretty close to get started. And then I'm going to route the wiring the same way underneath the bike and over towards the coil area. Okay, got my wiring ready to go. I'm about to plug everything in. Just going to show you how it's set up. You can see where I've routed the wiring harness up here from the ignition module. So I have ring terminals installed on the blue, pink, and white wires. White is the switched hot, which will go, I believe, to the center tap on the new coil. And that's also going to have the white with the black striped wire from the original coil attached to it. Then I have my blue and pink wires, I believe, yeah, blue and pink, and those are my front and rear coils. Front and rear plugs that attach to the coil. Pink is the rear cylinder, blue is the front cylinder. Then I have green and purple. Purple, let me look at my wiring diagram here. Purple wire is the VOES, the vacuum advanced switch, which I'm using on this stock motor. And then green is the TAC output. So I put those into a little 2-pin plug here, make it easy to connect. And then here's my original plug that went to the original ignition module. I've pulled out the pink and the purple with the white stripe wires. So the purple with the white stripe matches the purple on our ignition module for the VOES vacuum switch. And then the let's see here, the green from our ignition, our new ignition, goes to the pink wire for the TAC. So anyway, sorry, I'm looking at my diagram, making sure I get the color straight. So I depend those from the connector and put them in a plug here so I can have an easy connection. And that's going to go right back here where the original ignition module was mounted. Okay, so I'm going to get all these connections finalized and then I'll show you everything hooked up. Alright, here's everything attached at the coil here. We have our front and rear cylinders, blue and the pink. We have the white wire from the harness and the white wire from our old coil, both installed at the center tap. We have our vacuum advanced switch and TAC hooked up here. And that's really all your electrical connections. So now that's done, I'm going to get the electrical box put back in place, and I'm going to make and install new spark plug wires, and then we're ready to test it. Alright, got everything buttoned up over here. It's all plugged in, got my wiring tied up, electrical box back in place, new plug wires. Okay, so that's done. Now I'm going to go set the switches on the ignition and we can fire it up. Alright, here you can see how I set the switches for my bike. Switch 1, I'm still using a VOES vacuum advanced switch, so I have it set to off for normal operation. I'm using the curve 1 right now to do some testing, so I've got switches 2 and 3 set to off, which is the recommended curve for a stock 80-inch motor. I have my RPM limit set at the lowest at 5500 for a stock motor again, so switches 4 and 5 are off, and then I'm using a single fire coil, so I have switch 6 set to on. So that's it, pretty easy to set, and go ahead and fire it up here. I've got to dial in the timing a little bit, but it's pretty close. Kind of cool that it has a status light showing you when the ignition's triggered, and a VOES activation light. So that's about it. I'm gonna button this thing up and get the timing dialed in. So that's your Ultima single fire ignition kit install. It's pretty easy, so give it a shot. I can already tell the bike starts up much quicker than it did before, and with the Andrews EV27 cam I'm doing soon, this is going to make a pretty big difference, I think. Alright, see you next time.